What's up, YouTube? Ryan Pandy here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. 10 years feels so much shorter when you were actually cognizant for all of it. You know what I mean? Like when you were 13, there was very little common thread or connection with whatever was going on when you were 3. You probably have, I don't know, the same skin color, most likely, the same eye color, but beyond that, that's kind of where it ends. Your appearance, your mannerisms, your interests, your hobbies, all of that, there's no relation at all across that decade. But if you're my age, in 2011, you were probably doing a lot of the same dumb shit that you're doing now. Just not as much changes over that 10 years. And it's fascinating to see more things sort of sticking as you get older. Like if you're 25, for example, and you get into a new hobby or a new author or a new band or whatever, there's not a ton of reasons why you won't also find it appealing at 35. Obviously, we all are constantly growing and evolving in perpetuity, and circumstances do change, but less drastically and less exponentially than what you experienced growing up. Which brings us to the 10-year anniversary of The Hymn of a Broken Man by Times of Grace. You know, there are a lot of goofballs out there who might tell you that the best Killswitch Engage album is Alive or Just Breathing. There are a lot of even goofier people who will tell you that The End of Heartache with virtuoso vocalist Howard Jones is the best Killswitch Engage album. These people are all dumb. The best Killswitch Engage album is called The Hymn of a Broken Man by Times of Grace. Contextually, this record was a fascinating thing because you have the key songwriter and band leader of Killswitch Engage, Adam D., making an entire side album with the band's former singer, Jesse Leach, while Killswitch still toured with his replacement. That's really weird when you think about it. And it's not like this was like a rap mixtape or something like some sort of silly side thing that had no relation at all. It was played in a pretty similar style to Killswitch, which of course we will get to the key differences because I'm being kind of facetious calling it a Killswitch album. But still, this is like if Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth made a side album in 1987 while Van Hagar was touring arenas. So when this record got announced, it was intriguing because for those of you who don't know, Jesse Leach made this landmark, amazing record with Killswitch back in 2002 called Alive or Just Breathing, then promptly quit. He was replaced by Howard Jones, who was a very different but great fit for the band. They make 3 big records with him, and then all of a sudden we're hearing about like a side album with Adam and Jesse. It just triggered so many questions, like how is this going to be any different from what Killswitch are playing already? Like what's the point? And most importantly, unless you had been following his lower profile music in the interim, how the hell does Jesse Leach even sound now? This is 8 years later. That's like being 30 years old and reuniting with your college girlfriend. And that question specifically, the question of Jesse Leach's vocals, is what I know set me up, and I'm sure set a lot of people up, for a big fucking surprise with this record. Because Jesse's massive improvement, I would say transformation as a vocalist from Alive to this record, is almost startling on here. Because, not to continue my whack-ass Van Halen analogy, but Jesse back in the day was David Lee Roth. Tons of personality and attitude and just a great frontman, so you'd forgive him for any sloppy live performances or just general shortcomings as a technical vocalist. And then Howard Jones came in, and Howard Jones was Sammy Hagar. He was the one with the pipes, like who could really, really sing. But Jesse's clean singing on this record, Hymn of a Broken Man, with a little bit of help from Adam D., who also does a good amount of singing here, is just way cleaner. There's way less strain on his high notes. It's definitely less pitchy, and he's also more emotionally nuanced within his inflections of those pitches. And just in general, a lot warmer and more inviting and less rough around the edges than I know I remembered him. Not that for a mostly hardcore vocalist he was at all bad for that era of the band, because he was amazing for that era of the band, but it's just a different guy. His voice on this record naturally lends itself to a different musical MO. And on Hymn of a Broken Man, this hugely improved Jesse Leach 2.0 got paired with material that, and I don't care what any fucking lazy ass reviewers thought at the time, was noticeably different from what Killswitch Engage were doing. Doesn't matter that it's in the same overall genre, there are plenty of ways for projects to differentiate themselves from one another. So that was a massive 1-2 punch. First you have just a reinvigorated Jesse Leach, and you have a welcome deviation from that same tired Killswitch formula. Especially because, let's face it, after that disastrous self-titled record, the second self-titled record, excuse me, there was a big relief in hearing that it was different. Not only was that fucking fuzzed out, underproduced garbage guitar tone gone, thank God, but Jesse and Adam really do take you down some different roads on this record. We'll start here with the obvious examples. You have, of course, the blues-informed acoustic ballad, The Forgotten One of the highlights on the record, with the instrumentation basically just being some sparse guitar layering. You have these really sweet and pretty vocal harmonies, and you just have a lot of space compositionally, to the point where the song really breathes. You have a moment in the bridge where it's literally just like an acoustic guitar riff and some Jesse Leach vocal inflections, and that's like it, and that's fine. Brilliant song, no place on a Killswitch record, that's for sure. And then you have the closer on this record, which is by a mile my favorite song on here, Fall from Grace, which is also a ballad, but in pretty stark contrast to the forgotten one. It's very full and powerful in sound. It's super dramatic, and it's got these bone-chilling lyrics about a man just barely hovering over rock bottom, you know? There's this one line that always gets me. Eyes that once beamed with hope now only stare in remorse. It just conjures up this really vivid image of a man who's just had the life sucked out of him and has that kind of cold, apathetic demeanor of someone who's about to give up, whether literally give up on life or just in another avenue. Unbelievable song. And I'm not sure any Killswitch song has ever hit me as hard emotionally as Fall from Grace does, although there are certainly some contenders. So those two songs are songs that really stand apart from the KSC catalog, but other stuff worth mentioning, Until the End of Days on here, which has an appropriately apocalyptic atmosphere to it, and kind of these manic depressive mood swings and crazy dynamics that don't really happen on a Killswitch record, like between these really soft and delicate verses and harsh vocal chorus with these completely agonized screams. Again, those tonal shifts are much more sudden and dynamic than what you typically find on a Killswitch record. Also, End of Eternity is a song that has similar ups and downs. So we have tracks here that clearly separate Killswitch Engage and Times of Grace. But to me, the real key difference is actually in this record's overall mood and atmosphere. It's definitely an aggressive record, but aesthetically, it just has this brightness to it and hopefulness and optimism. It feels expansive rather than psychologically confined and tormented like a Killswitch record does. It feels like it's trying to widen your emotional universe rather than contract it to focus on something specific. And because of that, it ends up having a very positive and uplifting feel to it. And of course, that ends up being mostly reflected in the lyrics here. A song like Live in Love, which is pretty self-explanatory, but has a simple and sweet message that definitely feels a little contrarian for metal lyrics. Hope Remains, that's another one where you can kind of gauge it from the title alone. The song Willing, which is what I believe was the single for the record. And then even more telling, the songs that do take a darker lyrical turn, like End of Days, like End of Eternity, they still end with some sort of spiritual upswing. Even the most destitute song on here, which is Fall from Grace, the closer, still ends up being about having the resolve to not hit rock bottom. And there is another really key departure from the Killswitch Engage stuff, particularly from the Howard era up to that point. Because you see Howard's lyrics, think like Arms to Sorrow, End of Heartache, It Still Beats Your Name. They were about uplifting you by taking you directly through pain. You feel like shit, I feel like shit, this sucks, hopefully it'll end, but you're not alone. Right? That's kind of the message of the Howard Jones stuff. Jesse's lyrics, though, on this record, they feel like they're coming more from someone who is on the other side of a painful journey and is giving you like direct advice on how to overcome your emotional distress. It's a totally different feel. It really is a big difference, and you know, it might just stem from his background as a hardcore vocalist, because hardcore in general tends to be just a lot less misery loves company than metal is. So lyrically and thematically, this record is definitely distinct from Killswitch's stuff. We talked about several instances where stylistically it's distinct. And then you have songs like Willing on here and the title track, Hymn of a Broken Man, where it's not different at all. It's just better. It's just a higher quality version of what Killswitch were doing. So really, we got the best of both worlds here, which I'm realizing now that this extends my awful Van Halen analogy. That I didn't plan. I thought about the DLR and the Sammy Hagar thing, because I've always kind of thought of them in those terms, but that was rough. But seriously, we did get the best of both worlds, because this didn't end up being this crazy, wacky Mr. Bungle side project. Not that Mr. Bungle isn't amazing, but it didn't end up being like this crazy radical departure, but it also didn't end up being exactly the same shit. So to me, that's a win-win. That was the criticism of this record, and a lot of people kind of shrugged at it, because they're like, well, it's like kind of the same, but kind of not. But no, that's the point. It stands alone as a separate band, but it shares a lot of the good qualities of what we had already come to love and come to frankly expect from both these artists, although of course Jesse was a little more of a surprise, especially on the vocal front here. I enjoy every track on this record. I think the one kind of exception is the opener, Strength in Numbers, which just has that awful, overdone militant snare drum intro that every band in this genre did. I remember driving away from FYE being like, fuck, I'm gonna fucking hate this album, aren't I? But that ended up being definitely the exception rather than the rule. Seriously, every other track on here. If I had to pick favorites, I mean, definitely Fall from Grace is a special song to me. Hope Remains is amazing. A lot of really cool ideas in there. Fight for Life has a crazy groove to it. Worlds Apart, I love how sugary that one is melodically. A lot of great stuff on here. This really is an underrated deep cut of the broader new wave of American heavy metal movement that is definitely worth your time if you haven't heard it. I would even put it personally in my like top 20, 25-ish albums of that movement. Definitely not in terms of influence or impact or obviously popularity, but just in my personal list of albums that, looking back, to me feel timeless, pun intended, and feel like a distinct moment in time. And of course, bringing around full context here, we can't forget that right after this record was made, Jesse Leach rejoined Killswitch Engage and made 2 of their top 3 records for me back to back. So if you love the current incarnation of the band and you love records like Incarnate and Disarm the Descent, you largely have this little piece of side action for Adam D to thank. So yeah, happy 10th anniversary to Times of Grace, him and Broken Man. Let's hope for a follow-up here. I mean, they've always kind of teased that it would happen. And if it does happen, let's also hope that it holds up as well as this record did. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so by clicking right over here, as well as checking out any other rock or metal related content that I publish here on a weekly basis. I really appreciate you guys watching, liking, disliking, just engaging in any fashion. Twitter, Instagram handle @RyanPannyMusic. Again, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you soon.